Thank you so much, Bishop. And we warmly welcome you. It's such a joy and an honor to have you and to hear more about your work and ministry these days. As I was saying earlier, I think many of us kind of know your amazing story over the past couple of decades, but we want to focus today particularly also on where you see us going in the future. And so to help us do that is Patricia Pierce. And so, Patricia, I will call on you here. I do want to mention to our folks that after Patricia and the Bishop dialogue for a while, we'll have an opportunity for you, those who are in attendance, to come on board and ask Bishop a question, offer some thoughts, and dialogue with him. So if you have questions or thoughts that pop up during the interview, be sure and make a note, jot them down, and when we come to that, you can click the button that says raise your hand, and we'll call upon you and bring you on the screen and let you have a chance to talk with Bishop Carlton Pearson. So Bishop, welcome. And Patricia, we'll turn it over to you now. I'll disappear for a little bit, and you guys have a great interview and conversation, and we'll come back together in a little bit for some Q&A.
Thank you, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And Bishop, I would just like to reiterate Joe's thanks to you for being with us today and our excitement about this conversation and having you with us. And the title of our program today is New Dimensions in Spirituality. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts from your vantage point. What do you see those new dimensions in spirituality are that are arising right now?
Well, first of all, thank you, Grace and Joe. You both are most hospitable. And to my friend, our friend, Grace, Donna Mosh, who made me aware of you.
Yeah.
She's one of my big sisters in spirituality. She's helped me walk through this whole new journey of expanded consciousness and thought. And she's very, very, she has a lot of depth, but she's very practical. She almost demystifies it and then mystifies it at the same time. That's what I like about her. She's very practical. But I see us in the future, and we look much better than we look right now. The world is evolving, and it's upgrading itself and upgrading the human species. The universe is correcting herself. All that's happening on the planet, from global warming to political uprisings, there's a shift in consciousness, and we are literally observing the demolition of the past and the building and bringing of a brand new spiritual paradigm. I'm classical Pentecostalism of 4 generations on both sides of the family. And that's all about transcendence. So I've always been around mysticism or spirituality because Pentecostalism is the edgy, exotic, extravagant form of fundamentalism. And like Kabbalah would be for Judaism and Sufism would be for Islam in some ways. And so I'm enjoying this new fragrance and this new flavoring of the country. I've never seen more evolution or growth and the biggest movement now is among evangelical fundamentalist Christians who are bored and experiencing cognitive dissonance and are saying, this doesn't work for me. I mean, I'm hearing from preachers and bishops and leaders of huge ministries and churches that are saying, we didn't like what you said 20 years, buddy, but one preacher called me and said, I'm going through your book the 3rd time, dude. I don't know where I am. I'm not quite there, but I ain't where I was. And he says, I really don't have that much of a theological problem with you. It's a business decision. He said, I got to eat. I got a parsonage and a pension.
Christianity Inc., as you call it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I understand that I experienced great loss, but I gained much more than I lost. I love the statement by Voltaire, which was made back in the 1700s when he said, those who can convince you to believe absurdities can persuade you to commit atrocities.
Mm.
And if you look at the history of religion, all religions, particularly the Abrahamic faiths of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and particularly the last 2, Christianity and Islam, we've been very aggressive in evangelizing. In fact, I think slavery is birthed in the whole idea of King James. Many of the present Christians get King James and King Jesus mixed up. Both of their mother's name was Mary. One was supposedly a virgin. The other one is Mary, Queen of Scots. And King James 16th century English says, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. Now, in other languages, it may be different, but in English, a creature is not a human.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A creature is a monster or a rodent, a rat, a raccoon, a baboon, whatever. So I think there's this, and that's what we're experiencing in this American culture right now, is that many, even of our dearly beloved Christian friends, have never seen us as equals. We're creatures that should be somehow saved and enslaved.
Yeah.
Preaching the gospel, teach them Jesus, and then make them work for you. So, in 400 years of America, that's what it's been. And that's changing before our very eyes. I think people like, and I don't want to even sound political, but I think people like Donald Trump were exposed to ultimately bring expelling of certain energies from our country.
I totally agree with you.
To what needs to be expelled.
Yep. All of this stuff is coming to the surface now so that we can look at it and release it. Yeah.
It's part of the cleansing, part of the correction, part of the clearing. I feel really good about the future.
Yeah. So do I, actually. There's so much more going on than we perceive on the surface level. And as you consider this, as you call it, the upgrade of the human species, how would you characterize that upgrade?
Well, you can't really go through learning without a lot of unlearning.
Yeah.
Or evolution without dissolution. The upgrade means we unload the luggage, that which we have been lugging throughout millennia.
Oh, your our audios are being turned off somehow. I don't know how that's happening. I think we're back.
That's the conservatives are doing now, Kitty. There's a
quiet. Shut these people up.
Those people, the words, now they're shutting us down. We're unloading. We're dealing with a generation of young people. One of the things that was really interesting to me during the first parts of right after George Floyd was murdered, and all these non-Black people started doing the Black Lives Matter thing. And I was sort of stunned that there were far less people of color involved in it than the non-color. So I was in the Beverly Hills, Santa Monica area of LA, and I stopped. I would blow my horns and, give them thumbs up. And I stopped and asked one of them, so what are you guys doing out here? Do your parents know you're out here? Some said yes, some said no. I said, well, what makes you feel comfortable? And they said, well, the George Floyd thing made us get it. We realized that religion had not served us well. And we are actually in disagreement with the traditions that have influenced our culture. And for the first time, we feel your pain, brother. I was fighting tears like I'm now in this.
Wow. Yeah.
Love is a sort of a raggedy, sloppy word. Compassion is a better word, because nobody can hurt you or even hate you like somebody you love or who loves you. But when they say, I have compassion for you, that means I feel your pain. I feel your pathos. I feel your passion. That's how we can relate. We don't have to go along to get along. We can mind many of the same things without having the same mind about everything. So I see this growing crop of diversity, whether it's same gender loving people or ethnic people from Asia or India or Africa. There's this beautiful conglomeration of people coming together to make this beautiful tapestry with all the different lines and linens and lineages woven around each other to make this beautiful picture of who we are as human beings. So when I say upgrading the consciousness, the character, the culture, and hope in America, the Congress, just cleansing and clearing some things out to where we're literally unlearning. I'm always unlearning and unloading every day. I can learn from these young people.
Yeah. The evolution continues.
Layers and layers and layers. We're religious people from our background, Presbyterian, Methodist, whatever, Pentecostal. I'm just taking a lot of that stuff off and getting a brand new wardrobe.
Yes, I think of it, Bishop, as undoctrinating the mind.
Good terminology. I like it.
Yeah, to let that go, because so much of it, well, the doctrines, so much of those belief systems arose from this former consciousness. That was the soil in which these ideas came forth.
Mm-hmm.
And that consciousness of separateness, that egoic mind, that perceives separateness. I'm separate from you. I'm separate from the source. And your pivotal moment in your journey was the realization of the reality of inclusion.
Yes.
And it was that aha that you had, that no one is excluded from love.
Yeah.
That seemed to strike at the core of a belief system. And it rocked the boat. It was like an earthquake. Tell me more about looking back now, and with your understanding of inclusion, and looking back, how do you see it now in terms of the threat that it poses to the mindset that wants to exclude and see the other as an other?
Well, institutional religion and organized religion is the seedbed of tribalism, territorialism, exclusivism. We think our religious mindsets are better than somebody else's. And so we fight those. If you believe in a God who hates Jews, or who hates Gentiles, or who hates gays or atheists or Asians or Catholics, then you're devoted to that God, then you don't mind hating that same group. Mm-hmm. Hitler burnt the Jews, and he learned about the fiery furnaces from the scriptures. He read the writings of Martin Luther, who was anti-Semitic, and he, in the Catholic churches, kind of was duplicit in what he did, and all of Eastern Europe, most of whom were Protestants, and many Catholics as well, supported him. He didn't do all that he did by himself. So we're dealing with at least 2,000 years of entrenched indoctrination. And so we're now having to face the fact that we probably got it wrong, that maybe the greatest story ever told was simply just the greatest story ever sold. And we all bought it or bought into it. And it gave us permission and almost commission to hate those who were not us. Mm. And inclusion, radical inclusion, helped diminish my confusion, because love is confusion. I loved people who weren't Christian. I loved people who weren't Protestants. I loved people who weren't Pentecostal. I loved people who weren't my race or my culture. And some of my best friends we hung out all week long until Sundays. And that was the day when we all had to be radically exclusive. So just like white supremacy, there's religious supremacy. Mm-hmm. And I have to admit, as the fundamentalist Christian for 4 generations, I really thought that we had the supreme truth, that we were better than everybody else, that we were the chosen few, and that everybody but us was wrong and hell-bound. In the midst of all of that, I was dealing with the concept of an angry God, or a God who could be angry. So I was trying to appease an angry God and please a difficult God. And I saw the mental illness that created among millions of people, a kind of psychosis, beginning with my parents and their parents. My dad saw his mother, who was a quote unquote backslidden Christian. And she came back to the Lord in my freshman year of college, but then she had a problem with gambling. We lived in San Diego, so she played the dogs the night before she had a massive heart attack and died. And Daddy saw her after they had 3 unsuccessful attempts to resuscitate her. He walks into behind the curtain in the emergency room, and her arms are hanging off the bed. Her breasts are exposed from them trying to resuscitate her. Her mouth's agape. Her eyes are barely half open. And she looked horrified and horrifying. She looked like, because she was a Pentecostal preacher too, she looked like she was in the place where she taught him, her eldest son, people like her who gamble go.
Wow. Yeah.
Betty quickly covered her breasts and folded her hands in front of her, tried to close her mouth and eyes so his sisters wouldn't see her looking that way when they came in. But he carried that until I began to write the book of the Gospel of Inclusion. I sat with my dad. It's about 78 or 79. And I saw the big tears streaming down his face when I convinced him that his mother was not in an eternal burning, weeping, wailing, gnashing of teeth lake of fire, because it was eating him alive. He had developed ulcers.
Wow. Oh, my.
His back was all out of joint. And he was a sweet, sweet man, but he suffered all of those years because my dad would not only kill for his mother, he would die for her or any of us. And he said, son, I couldn't imagine, because he sat at her funeral rocking, trying to nurture my mother and his sisters and cousins and everybody. At the funeral, the coffin is in front of us, and all of us in that room, Grace believed that my grandmother was in hell. And yet we were singing, be not dismayed, whatever betide, God will take care of you. Beneath his wings of leather, God will. We were saying that, but we didn't believe it. We knew the woman we loved, the matriarch of her family, was not only going to hell, she was already there. She'd been dead 2 weeks. So that kind of psychological erosion, and it's in many religious reformations, it diminishes the human being. It slowly assassinates you. And then you may say you love and trust God, but you really don't. Sometimes I preached and I thought I was under the anointing and I was just annoyed. I know a lot of preachers like that. They get in there and thunder those messages out. There's a lot of anger among these guys who can't win their own families. And so the new world in the next 50 to 100 years at the most, religion as we've known it, including Christianity, will dissipate and probably disappear or become greatly diminished. And the new spirituality, which will be the connection, beautiful connection of science and technology and spirituality or mysticism. John Self, was his name, the inventor of the where's Donna Marshall when I need it? The inventor of the phone. So the Apple.
Jobs, Steve Jobs. Is that
Jobs.
Yeah.
My Apple phone has an apple with a bite out of it.
Yes, so does mine.
This must be the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
But the word knowledge means science, conscience or conscious, consciencia in Latin, with knowledge. It was a woman, Eve. Her name is Chava in Hebrew, but the King's 16th century translators named her Eve, which has suggested that she's evil or evening or dark. That's why women have been mistreated and abused for millennia. This Me Too movement is not new. We've been abusing the female essence on this planet, particularly in the Abrahamic faith, for thousands of years, yes, because we think she's evil. The womb man, which is the man with the womb, is also the man with the wound. And we men and the patriarchy and chauvinism of religion has wounded many, many women. And now they're coming alive and they're alert and they're saying, wait a minute, this far and no further. There are more females in seminary than males. There are more females in medical school than males. We'll probably soon have the first female president. It's just a different world. Yeah. I see us in the future.
Yes,
much better than we look.
Yes, the rise and the return of the feminine is part of this huge global shift that we're experiencing, and along with that, Christ consciousness. You talk about religions becoming irrelevant and dissipating, and yet the consciousness, and you use this term, Christ consciousness or Christ principle, is that which is awakening within us.
Yes.
So your perception of Christ consciousness, if you would speak about that, and what does that mean for the world as we open more and more to the Christ consciousness that is within us?
Christ consciousness is the mystical aspect of human beings being human. Way before Jesus was called Christ, the Jews never called him Christ. Orthodox Jews didn't and don't. Messianic Jews do. But Jesus was in touch with his Christ consciousness. Now, the scripture is completely silent for 18 years, from age 12 to 30, as to where Jesus was, with whom he was, and what he was doing. It just, from age 12, I think he might have been in India studying on some of the ashrams and studying some things about enlightenment through Buddhist. And I'm sure he probably went to the East, because wise men came from the East and they were astrologers. Pat Aster means stargazing. Like Pat Asher, the shepherds were watching their sheep by night. They looked into the heights of the higher domains, the higher angles and angels or messengers of reality. In the highest reaches and regions and rhythms of consciousness, there is a reality that people title God. God is not a name, it's a title. It's divine mind. And I think that our world is beginning to shift into the ether. When Jesus is quoted to have said to Nicodemus, Nicodemus came to him by night and said, "Teacher, Master, we know you're a teacher sent of God," because nobody could do these miracles. No one could have all this transcendence and except God be with him. And Jesus said, "You must be born again, dude." What? Nicodemus, what are you born again? The word again in Greek is anothen, where we get the English word another, an ether. He says, "Nicodemus, you must have had some kind of ethereal otherness experience of transcendence. You moved out of religion into mysticism. Mm-hmm. You must be awakened." He wasn't
born of the Spirit.
Born of the Spirit, born of above. That's what's happening, Grace, all over the earth right now, in every religious dimension. Mm-hmm. People are awakening. Many people are not only awakening, because some people are alarmed. They hear the alarm and they push the snooze button and they go back to sleep.
Yep, over and over. Yep.
Over and over, repeatedly. Mm-hmm. But there's a group that not only wakes up, but gets up like you did, and speaks up like you're doing, and shifts up and looks up. That's what's happening on the earth today. I get chills just thinking about it. There's a new wave of clarity. The religious word would be glory, but that means doxa. The church has been suffering from truth decay. They need some, and I can spell the spiritual halitosis. The spirit stinks. Excuse, that breath is bad. So we need an orthodontist and some orthodoxy, which just means you straighten the truth. You know, when God is quoted to have said, Adam and Eve, you are free to eat from any tree or truth in the garden. That's where the apple phone comes in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's the science there's a science to good and a science to evil. And we're having to now navigate through, negotiate through what that means, because we struggle with it, the dual consciousness. So we're coming into a different unification of mind, which does bridge science and spirituality in the most unique and almost seamless manner. And it starts with all this technology. These kids, they're like aliens from another planet. They get it. Yeah. You know, we used to sing, he's got the whole world in his hand. He's got the whole wide world in his hand. He's got the whole world. He got the whole world. But if you got an iPhone, you got the whole world in your hand.
So true.
You got the whole wide world.
Yeah. Yeah. And bringing together science and spirituality, bringing together the masculine principle, the feminine principle, bringing together heaven and earth, spirit and matter. It's all merging.
Yes.
It's all merging. And out of that consciousness, of that unitive consciousness, a new world can arise, because the world arises from the consciousness that we're holding, the world that we create collectively. So this Christ principle, or this Christ consciousness, is on the rise, even as the influence of religions is diminishing. It makes me wonder if perhaps religions then have completed their task. They've served their purpose. They've been a container.
I agree.
For us. In a way, I think of it as a placenta almost, to hold the emerging life until it can be born into its fullness. And then, then the function of that has been completed.
Well, it's been a placenta and a placebo. It treated an illness we really didn't have, but we thought we did.
Yeah.
And but there is something very powerful. I appreciate, Grace, I don't have any regrets of the first 50 years of my life as a fundamentalist Pentecostal preacher and do all the stuff I did. I really don't. I don't even apologize for it. I just moved on. I have expanded beyond it. I haven't completely abandoned all of it, but that which was luggage and not uplifting, I let it go. Religion has played a powerful, pivotal role in history, but the 20th century brand of it doesn't fit into the 21st century the same way.
Yeah.
And it's not being received or accepted or validated. And what you see happening, particularly in America, but around the world, is people with white knuckle grip holding on to the past, trying to keep it in place. It's okay to resent change, but if you resist it, you'll lose.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not man-made. This change is a universal expression of self-correction.
Yep.
The universe, the moisture is rising. I think we've come, even Jesus is quoted to have said, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. King James translates it into the cosmos, but it doesn't say in Greek cosmos. It says aeon, where we get the English word eon. It's a designated period of time. We've come to that end from Pisces, if you're into astrology, into Aquarius, which is a male carrying a pitcher of water. And Jesus is quoted to have said in Luke, I think it's 22, go into the street, and when you see the man carrying the pitcher of water, follow him into that house. So I think he was hinting to his people, we're coming to the end of an age. And when you see, and that's most, at least in biblical history, men didn't carry water. It was always the woman at the well.
Yeah, right.
So men will become in touch with their feminine essence in a more pronounced way and not apologize for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Men will become more nurturing. You've had this bullying, macho, again, Trump-like attitude, but that's showing us what was and worked, but no longer can be and will no longer work. That spirit. I'm not talking about a person. I'm talking about an energy. So the new, I call mystery, missed story. We're about to hear your story, Grace.
Her story, as opposed to his story. Yeah. So I want to share with you, it sort of ties in with what you're saying. I had a dream last night about our conversation. And when these interviews are coming up, they're on my mind.
Understand.
But this dream, I feel like it's meant for this conversation. So I'm going to share some basic elements of it. First of all, the event in the dream is happening in person, which surprised me because I thought we were doing it virtually. And it's in a large venue, a large auditorium, which I'm sure you're very, very familiar with doing events like that. And in the lobby, I come up and I introduce myself and we talk a little bit. And I'm thinking, there's something different about Carlton. There's something different. And then as it's time for the event to begin, we both start to move into the venue and you ask someone, could you play can somebody put some hot music on? I don't know what word exactly. And some sound tech starts to play Earth, Wind and Fire's Fantasy song. And you sort of dance your way in. And as you're doing that, I realize what's different. Carlton is a she. Carlton has transitioned during the pandemic. Carlton has undergone a change from male to female. And I'm like, wow. And then I'm backstage looking for a place to set my things. And I see that all the chairs have water on them and as though everything's been washed down beforehand. And that dream has been sitting with me because symbolically in my symbolic lexicon, you epitomize someone who has been willing to transition in a very profound way, has been willing to release, I guess I would call it an assigned identity. We all are sort of given these identities. And you came to understand that that wasn't truly who you were, and it's not truly who we are. We've been assigned these identities as, worthless creatures and all of that, sinful and all of that. And we're waking up, and humanity is transitioning. And there is this rising of the feminine. And I love that it was earth, wind, and fire. And then the water is on the stage. So it's like all of the elements are included. And that song in my waking consciousness, I didn't know the lyrics. I mean, it's one of those songs I'll start dancing to, and I'll sort of make up the words, because I don't really know what they are exactly. But I know you're a word guy. So, fantasy, first of all, power of imagination. And it comes from, in late Greek, it means to imagine, to have visions. And of course, it's related to phos, photon in Greek, light, to bring light, to show light. Mm-hmm. So the song they were playing was fantasy, show light, bring light. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to read the whole text because you and I could exegete this whole song, and we're not going to. We don't have time. But listen to this. Our voices will ring together until the 12th of never. We will all live love forever as one. Come and see victory in the land called fantasy. Loving life, a new decree, bring your mind to everlasting liberty. Our minds will explore together. Old worlds we will conquer forever. We then will expand love together as one. And it goes on, and you can look at the words, but I just want to thank you for your openness and your courage in allowing yourself to be transitioned, and more than that, to do it publicly.
Well, that's a very graphic dream. It very touches me. I mean, I see so much in it. A lot of those singers, rock stars, the Michael Jacksons and others, were prophets, and we didn't know it. Their lyrics, I was not allowed to listen to that kind of music, so we paid them no attention. They were prophets without honor in their hometowns. And so, how we define our reality is how we're going to experience our reality. These men and women were bringing definition that we ignored, and it created more of the chaos on the planet. Mm-hmm. I believe that we all come from some pre-incarnate reality by agreement, that we agree to come here, and we come here knowing, and then between the womb and the tomb go through the spiritual amnesia, and we forget what we know and start believing what we're told or taught. And the further we get away from coming out of the birth canal, the more our memory wanes. And then we start having, at least I did, these what I call spiritual deja vus. Between the womb and the tomb, we forget what we knew, and we start believing. What's about to happen in this new mysticism is knowledge will trump faith. Faith is functional, but it's not factual. We're going to be confronted with facts of our spirit, the real essence of who we are. Not your essential person is the permanent rather than accidental you. We spend our lives, you just alluded to it, impersonating who we think people want us to be.
Yeah.
Role playing.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't get to know our own essence. Ignorance doesn't mean not to know. It means not to notice or not to make note of. We're taught to ignore our souls, ignore ourselves, ignore the sync and syncopations of spirit. So rather than walking in sync or in cadence, we walk in decadence, and we decay. We start going backwards. What's happening is the universe said, no, we got to turn that around. You got to start moving forward. The race, the species has got to move to the higher. It's the up. That's what anthropos is in Greek for man, the upward looking one. We're looking upward. There are signs up there. There are signals up there in this age of Aquarius where we are recreating our own reality. We're invoking, inviting, and inventing a new reality.
Yeah,
And
indeed.
some of us, like, we're doing it intentionally, but a lot of us are doing it automatically. People are doing it habitually. It's just falling into place. It's like, I just don't want to go to that church or believe that way anymore. I found this other mystic movement that appeals to me.
Right.
Your audience is going to really increase because they're waiting to hear what you have to say and what you all are doing, because that's where we're headed.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Well, I want to thank you for this time, and I want to leave time for our audience members to pose their own questions. But again, I really thank you for who you are and for the work that you do, and for being the lightning rod that has released this new understanding in the minds of so many people.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask Joe now to come back on, and I will turn off my video, and thank you again.
Pleasure, Grace.
Thank you, Bishop and Patricia, for that wonderful, inspiring, and hopeful conversation. I think many of us today are just yearning for some hope and some vision out of the darkness we've come through. So it's just wonderful. Couldn't be better. We're going to open it up now. So I want to ask the participants if you would raise your hand if you might have a question, and we'll call upon you, and as many people as we have time for. So be sure we only know you have a question if you raise your hand. And so it appears that we have a question from Dr. Cynthia Scurry, Brooklyn, and I'm going to ask if she could turn on her video. This will take a moment. Turn on her video and unmute herself, and have her question for Bishop Carlton Pearson. There you are,
okay.
Cynthia.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you. Well, my question is for Bishop Pearson, because I've sat as he has taught over the years. I am from Valdosta, Georgia, and this is where I first, came in contact with Bishop Pearson, and I have been drawn to his teaching, ever since. I heard him months ago discuss on a panel with Bishop Bernard Jordan about talking about the rhythms and the conjuring when there is beats from Africa, the tones of the sounds that we made, what we call praise, and worship. And I was wondering if he could just elaborate on that just a little, as we're talking about mysticism. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Great question. I was in Valdosta probably 35 years ago. Mavis Sermons she sang with the Royal Action Singers. You brought back a lot of memories when you mentioned Valdosta, Georgia. We don't just spell words. Words spell us and cast spell on us. That's what a spellbinding speaker or spellbinding song. It captures your attention. To be under a spell means to be enchanted. And the root there is chants, repetitions, vibrations, energy. So we chant. That's what the cantor in a synagogue does, or the Gregorian chants. Long before people could read, they could only hear words sung or chanted or repeated. From the old Pentecostal background, patting of the foot, clapping of the hands, moving the body, and repeating or resounding, repeating the same thing over until you get enchanted by it. And what you listen to repeatedly becomes your motto. What you think about, you bring about. So we were taught certain chants or enchantments. And I'm not saying it's wrong to be under a spell, but it's not healthy if the spell is destructive. If you're constantly saying to yourself, you're nobody, you're a victim, and you let that consciousness prevail, you'll always feel like a nobody and always feel like a victim. But when you change your chant or change your message or change what you say, as Wayne Dyer says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Pentecostalism, and I don't know, Doctor, if I would have actually stayed in religion were it not for Pentecostal's transcendence. the transcendent part gave me space to get out. I found an escape from the dogma and the disciplines that were destroying my consciousness or limiting it. And so that Pentecostal roots sort of informed this new expansion. And now I'm in another enchantment. I love to hear the language of New Thought, mystic language. And I'm studying other mystics, because mysticism is not new. In fact, it's the oldest religion on the planet, if you want to call it a religion. The mystics of the ancient worlds, I mean, way before, thousands of years before Christianity, there were mystics, and they were Christ conscious, like Krishna was that, Mithra, all the way back to Isis and Egyptian theology, and back to the Akkadians and Sumerians, who may have had contact with extraterrestrials, for all we know, because the scripture says, in beginning, gods, not Elohim in Hebrew, a consortium, a council, a family of deities or entities, gods, created the heavens, higher reaches, spaces, rhythms of consciousness, and one earth. And they later said, now they have become like us, not me, but us, knowing, scientific about good and evil. So let us make humans. So there's some kind of consortium out there. So we repeat those things. And now even things like Make America Great became a motto, a mantra for millions of people. And it really meant make America hate again legally. So you could put your knee on somebody and kill them legally and get by with it. Well, that's changing. Another generation of Americans said, oh, no, we break that chant. We break that spell. We're not going to be unkind to people just because they're different from us. That the church wouldn't do that. So the secular people, who I think are sacred humanists, which is what I think Jesus was. I consider myself a sacred more than a secular humanist. I believe in the sanctity, the elegance, eloquence, and excellence, the forward thrust of the human entity, that we're moving forward away from things that shackled us. This is a great day, and you're probably a freedom agent as well. Anybody into this mystic community would be freedom agents or warriors, angels and agents and warriors, gaining freedom and sharing it. We are healed and healing healers.
Yes, gaining freedom. Yes, because I grew up Pentecostal. That is all that I have known. Wow. When you came to Valdosta, you came to Victory Temple, and I was there, as one of the worship leaders. And I have always been that person who go forth and worship. And I love the traditional chants. I can flow and go from there. And I'm learning, because my mind went back to situations. And when I heard you say it, I wanted to know more. I'm so hungry to know more. So I hope this panel is not just a one-time panel, and that I can hear more about mysticism.
Thank you, Dr. Cynthia. That was so timely and wonderful. And thank you for being with us. We have another question. I want to call on Margaret and see if you can turn on your video and come on board with Bishop Pearson and let us hear your question.
Hi.
Did you start your video? We hear you.
Start my video.
There you go. Hi, Margaret.
Hi. I am just meeting you for the first time, and I'm delighted. Well, I was raised by a grandmother who followed Rudolf Steiner, who's a Christian mystic. So in my world, I never had to expand or I was there already. Yeah. But I would like to know, because I haven't read your book, did you have a mystical moment? Did you have a great awakening? That was there?
Yes, ma'am. Good question. I've had several all my life, but when I got married and had my first child, I had a lot of guilt because I was enjoying marriage and parenting so much. I thought that was for commoners. And I was going to be like Jesus and Paul and all those guys and stay single and never marry and have kids and sacrifice all that and just serve Jesus. And then by 40, I was not satisfied with my spiritual growth or expansion or ministerial growth, though I had a fairly prominent place in those circles. And I saw some children coming from Rwanda and returning from Rwanda to Uganda. The Hutus and Tutsis had fought, and it was bitter and bloody. And I'm sitting there with my little girl, Majesty. She's now 25. She was in my lap, and my dad was there with me, and I was hugging her and kissing on her. But I was seeing this Peter Jennings story. It's in the movie when you see the movie come Sunday, of these people returning. And I saw these mothers with forlorn looks in their face, no vision for the future, sitting on the sides of the road. Breasts looked like deflated balloons, and the babies were pulling at the empty breasts and no food, and their hair had changed colors of starvation. Their bellies were distended. And I started crying, and I presumed that those people were Muslims or heathens, quote unquote, didn't know Jesus and were on their way to hell. And I remember saying to God in my thought life, if you're a God of love, how could you take those people from hell and suck them right back into hell? It doesn't make sense to me. Now I was a bishop, a fundamentalist bishop in the Church of God, in the Pentecostal circles of the. So the thought came back to me. So that's what you think we're doing, sending them to hell? Where do you get that concept? And I'm thinking, well, it's in the Bible. Hell exists. These are non-believers because David says, I once was young, now I'm old, never seen the righteous forsaken, or seed begging bread. There were no men. They were all women. Their husbands were dead. They'd been disemboweled, dismembered, horrible torture. And these people had no hope, and I was feeling guilty. And that's when I began this conversation about radical inclusion. And that's when I began to doubt the existence of eternal torture, but temporary torture on earth that those who believe in hell create it for themselves and for others, that we create that here on this planet or plane of consciousness, and that I should begin to address it. That was and then I got up on Sunday, the following Sunday, and told that story, and my people freaked out. I had 5,000 coming each Sunday, and they thought, what are you talking about, dude? You know? So it began, and a year or so after that, everything was gone. But I had been born again, born anew. You're blessed to have been raised by an expanded conscious thinker and thought leader like Rudolf Steiner. So you don't have all that luggage and all that, all those layers of guilt and shame and sham. You're a free spirit. I like hanging out with people like you. That's a free.
Well, thank you for telling me your story. I will watch your film. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret, so much. And we have another question from the Reverend Ardella. If you could turn on your video. There you are. Let's see. Turn on your video, Reverend Ardella Angela Young, and unmute yourself. There you are. And get you unmuted.
Hi.
Welcome.
I wasn't expecting to be called on. Hello, Bishop. I met you in 2014 at Revelations. You took a picture with me and my partner. We were students at Innovations Worldwide, and we were in a spiritual life coaching class. And you're in a book we made, well, a little magazine. But the thing is, it's really funny how my partner, she made a decision, well, I'm going to just go back to the old way of Christ, which is okay. She can do that. But you and other leaders as Michael Beckwith and Yanya Van Zant, but especially you. I was excited when I got the email, so thank you for sending me the email. But when you mentioned Earth, Wind, and Fire and Michael and all of them. I'm like, well, I believe that definitely. That's what I praise God on some of them songs, especially Keep Your Head to the Sky. And what I really want to know, because I'm on a journey and I'm breaking through the shame and the guilt from the past. And I'm 63, going to be 64, but I don't feel that way.
Or looking.
Thank you. But the thing is, what would you offer to me? Because I've been walking in, and I have good mentors, Reverend Jim Webb. He's wonderful. And I know I've been given direction. But the thing is this fear. This is this fear inside of me, because I live in Philadelphia. I want to open something here. I want to share with the children. I want them to know. And I know it's in me. But I have this, I guess is one of my teachers say you got the pee running down your leg. Well, that's what I got right now. But I know it has to be done. And but seeing you, I look forward to seeing you today, because I don't hide what I believe. And here people run from me. They say, oh, what's she talking about? But
let me just tell you that Michael Beckwith was one of my gurus. When 20 years ago, I was introduced to him by Stevie Wonder and Mark Victor Hansen. And Michael is one of my best friends on the planet right now. And God, I would say, to use the old language, God used it. But in thousands of people's lives, of course. But I have a personal relationship with him. Fear is faith in reverse.
Yeah.
A person who fears a snake has faith in the snake's power to destroy. Both of them are highly energetic terms and experiences and expressions. Take the fear that you have, and most of our pain is historical. It comes out of our past.
Yeah.
It's something back there. Sometimes you have to go back to the place where you first felt unworthy or unwelcomed or unwanted or unliked or unaffirmed, or where you were first abused verbally, psychologically, physically, or even sexually. You go back to that space and you revisit it as accurately as you can. And here's how you change it. You can't change the experience, but you can change the lie in that experience that said you are less than or other than, or that you're not loved, or that you don't count, or you're unworthy or unwelcomed or unwanted. That's what you extract from the experience. That's how you regain your self-respect.
Right.
You don't forget what happened, and you don't have to forgive what happened. You have to forgive the one through whom it came. Sins are unpardonable. We don't want to pardon sins. We want to pardon sinners, or people who sin against our elegance or eloquence or excellence as humans. So you're very powerful, and the aloneness is okay. When certain rockets take off, they have rocket boosters. When you get a certain level, the boosters fall off. You get another level, the other boosters fall off. There's nothing wrong with the boosters or your partners. Okay. It's just that they're not designed to fly in your orbit.
Ooh.
So accept the orbit that's given you, and don't denounce or deny the boosters that fell off. You're okay, and you're on your way to that wealthy place in consciousness. You're very powerful. You're privileged to be you, unapologetically. I don't see the tension in your face. I don't see the age in your face. You're doing something right. Because I know black don't crack. I know black don't crack.
Thank you, Reverend Ardella. That's such a wonderful, wonderful question, and it opened such good wisdom from the bishop up coming forth. So thank you for your question, and God bless you in your journey. So we will maybe have time for one or two more questions. Let's see, we have a question from Janet. I was going to see if Janet can turn on her video and unmute if she's muted. Hello, Janet. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. I can't hear the hopeful forecast for the future too much. And it's one that I hold on to very often as I read headlines and try not to get pulled into the turbulence that is so active right now. My question is what you would recommend for kind of bringing this down to the nitty-gritty when there is a family member whose views and values seem at great odds with those that we hold, MAGA supporters, within the family. And there is a lot of tension and a lot of pain and a lot of grief. And figuring out how to navigate that, I would just love your thoughts.
Well, first of all, and that's a very common question that we're all facing right now, those of us who are progressive. We're trying to deal with people we love. I have a 91-year-old mother who lives with me. She's not creating any problems, but she's in the old mindset and early stages of dementia. Then I have family members that are raised 4 generations just like me, and they won't take a vaccine, or they think and at the same time think the virus is a hoax. How can you do both? But anyway, we must be first careful not to put a period where the universe has a comma or semicolon, and make sure that we don't use exclamation points unnecessarily, because an exclamation point amplifies and magnifies the thing. Things are never as bad as they seem, and they can always be worse. By the same token, they're never as good as they seem. They could always be better. So we have to find that happy, I call it that happy, holy middle space there, and love the people that we like the least and try to like them more. We don't try to persuade or convince them all, because I'm saying this by some sense of conjecture because I can't prove it, but most of these people are under a spell. People that I'm telling you, people I know and love and have the highest respect for are so into that mentality of insanity and insensitivity. It's been very heart-rending and heartbreaking for me, because I love these people. I don't love them any less. So what I do is sometimes you just have to be quiet and find your sacred space, smile a lot, show them the light. Mm-hmm. It's like Francis of Assisi said, go into all the world and preach the gospel and use words when necessary. Gospel means good news. Now, I can tell by your smile, you have a very beautiful smile. There's a light high vibration about you. So you are good news. When you walk in a room, people feel you. You don't have to say a word. They can feel your energy, your vibration, and the signal you send when you walk in a room changes the energy in the room. Sometimes they don't know what to do with you, because they want to hate you and they can't. They want to criticize you and say, but she's so light and beautiful. And I don't know, I feel better about her or better about me because she came in the room. But worse about some of my opinions. But opinions are like idols. That's the number one idol on the planet. People worship their opinions. And so when you try to change their opinion, you're actually touching their God, and they will fight or die for that. So it's a very delicate situation, but it's best to be what you're looking for, the difference. And I think you've got to be at least halfway there.
Some days.
I got you.
Thank you.
Being honest.
Thank you, Janet. That was a great question. Thank you so much. I think we've got time maybe for one or two more questions. We have someone named Joan, I believe. It's listed as Joan and Abraham. So I'm not sure which one we have, but if you would turn on your video, we'd love to have you come on and ask your question for the bishop. Hi. Okay. Unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Here we are.
There
Can
you
hear me
go.
now?
Okay, welcome.
I'm so surprised. As you can see, I'm not in very good, dress. But
That's all right.
The question I have, Bishop, is you talked about the Garden of Eden and the fruit was available for everyone to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there is a line, if I'm not mistaken, that says that there's a fruit you're not to eat.
Yes.
And that's why we have the so-called fall. Could you address that, please? Because that sort of brought that question to my mind.
First of all, you're beautiful. It's always that beautiful face and smile. Let me paraphrase the statement. You are free, God is quoted to have said to Adam. Eve wasn't there yet.
Mm-hmm.
You're free to eat, which means to live off of any tree or truth in the garden, except the one that says any of the other ones are good or bad. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That was the judgmental tree.
I got it now. Except the one of good and evil. That was the one they were told not to eat of.
Yes. He didn't want them dying off of that kind of duality because it fights. Okay. And today we all struggle with good and evil. And we demonize evil or people we think is evil, and we want to kill them or cut them or curse them.
I totally understand when you said the word duality, because that's the problem that we have.
Yes.
We can't see anything in between.
Right.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Samantha Jerome.
By the way, you are very new to me. It's because of Patricia Pearson's email that I heard of you, and that's why I'm listening. And I think your journey is amazing and so encouraging.
Thank you.
To us.
Thank you, Joan.
Great meeting you, Joan.
Great to have you here. I think maybe we have time for one more question. We have a question from David. So we'll ask David to come on and see if he can turn on his video and unmute. And maybe we'll have our last question from David.
Sure. Bishop Pearson, thank you so much. This has been marvelous. I wanted to ask you about your experience of joy. I mean, before and after. You had a lot of joy back then in your fundamentalist days, and you remain a human being now with your moods and issues and so forth. But how is this experience? How has this awakening benefited you, inside, or does it transform your experience of the world, or what? Tell me, is there like an expansion of consciousness that embraces everything? Have you kind of become the universe, or is all that stuff from the Eastern scriptures kind of nonsense? Maybe you could,
No, great question, sir. And all of the above. People ask me, am I happy? And I don't say yes or no anymore. I just say I'm happening. I'm occurring. I exist. I feel a limitlessness that I didn't feel 20 years ago when people ask me, why did you change your mind? I said, I really didn't change my mind. My mind changed me because I was 50 years old and I had climaxed, if you will, plateaued in that profession, had a creating traffic jams every Sunday, trying to get in, police officers, controlling traffic, thousands of people. Anywhere I went in the country, traffic jams, standing before huge audiences as large as 250,000. My books were selling, my music was selling. I had music awards, stellar awards for singing gospel music, but my soul felt lean. A preacher called me one time. He said, I love the crowds, but I hate the people. And I got to the place where that wasn't working for me. So I wasn't sure what I wanted, but I knew it was more than what I had. And I felt like I was being limited by the group to whom I was serving, the group I was serving to whom I was preaching. So I started looking. For 20 years before I ever said anything, I would sit in a conference I was hosting with 10, 12,000 people in a venue, and I was wanting to get out of there. And it was my meeting, and they'd come. I wasn't even the speaker. I had different speakers every night, like Mike Beckwith's Revelation Conference, except he just limits it to about 1,000. But I had anybody who wanted to come. But I was still great preaching, great singing, great crowds. But I wasn't happy in my soul, or I didn't feel like I was happening. I felt like I was shutting down. So once I let all that go, a songwriter wrote a song that said, I lost it all, but I found everything. I died a pauper to be born a king. But once I learned how to lose, I found out how to win. I lost it all. I found everything. So I feel like I'm growing again and living again and expanding. And I don't see any limitation. Mm-hmm. To me, that's eternal. That's heaven on earth. That's my infinite self, my infinite soul in sync with itself. I don't see any limits. And to me, that is amazing. I don't fear death, and I don't feel life. Feel life.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for that question that gave us yet more wisdom from the bishop. Well, Bishop, I don't know what to say. This has been the most amazing interview and discussion. It's sometimes on the journey, for many of us, we find ourselves looking for those who may be on a similar journey. And to be able to have a chance like this to realize how many out there indeed are experiencing this awakening and are unlearning and relearning and finding that joy you described, it's just beyond words. And so we are so grateful for you being with us. It's been an honor and a blessing. And we thank Patricia for leading the wonderful interview with you. And so we've already heard several people saying they didn't know much about you, but they hope to see more. So maybe we can be together again at some point down the road.
I'm creating a channel that'll have, I call it Streaming Consciousness Channel.
Wonderful.
Shows like this, and perhaps I'll talk to Mrs. Pearson about it. It'll have Michael Beckwith and
wonderful,
Marianne Williamson and
wonderful
Sean Stevenson, the health expert. I've actually talked to Iyanla. She won't be able to come on until sometime in 22, but I want her to have her own show on there. And Deepak Chopra, if we can get him, just the new thought people and the mystics and the expanded consciousness, because fundamentalists have dominated the media for decades. I'm not denouncing that because I was part of it, but not enough. Just like these people are saying they've never seen or heard me. I never saw or heard Michael or Mary. I wasn't paying any attention to that group until about 20 years ago. Now it's like they're large and in charge. I love that. So we're going to do this again.
Wonderful. Well, listen, before you go, I want to alert you, because it relates to what we've been talking about, to our very next program coming up in 4 weeks. It's a little bit different, but it brings together 4 feminine voices, leading women in the area of mysticism who are, we might think, contemporary mystic. In addition to our own Patricia Pierce, it will have Mari Perron, who's the first receiver of A Course of Love. Chelan Harkin, which is one of the most amazing mystical poets today, who's even been likened to Rumi and some of these others. Mary Reed, who is a corporate educational person who at the same time was kind of, I think she calls herself an unwitting mystic. It came along when she wasn't even looking for it or expecting it. So this program is going to be kind of a panel of 4 of these newer enlightened voices coming to us. It's called Divine Wisdom, Earthly Voices. And so that's 4 weeks from today. And it's a sort of a special event. So I hope that everybody who was really touched and inspired by our conversation today would plug right in on that. And so mark your calendar. And Bishop, thank you so much for inviting us to be a part of the streaming channel, because I keep saying how amazed of the similarities of our journeys, into this new mysticism. And you're definitely a part of it. Of all the people I can think of who is definitely a contemporary mystic, you would be one of them. So thank you, Patricia, for all of this.
Thank you, Bishop.
We love you. And remember, be safe, be well, and remember that you are perfect, just exactly as you are. God bless you and be with you, my friends.
Beautiful.